All right, miracles, we all need them. So we pray, we ask God for one, but then nothing happens. And prayer suddenly begins to feel like a waste of time. It feels defeating. So then we think, well, I'm just going to quit praying because it does no good anyway. But before you do that, let's hear today why prayer actually really does work. Even if it's answered the way we don't want it to be answered, join us today. All right, good morning. Welcome to our Acts in 10-ish series. Today we are going to talk a little bit about miracles, because all we have to do is walk outside at nighttime or walk outside during the day and see there's miracles all around us. Like the sun coming up is actually miraculous. The ocean that doesn't flow over the entire earth is pretty miraculous. Babies are born, miracle. The earth continues to spin, miracle. Fruit that comes like literally is grown on trees. That feels like a miracle. This made me laugh. There was a story of a teenager who used this old fruit tree that he would, that had grown up, and then he would get out his window like when he wanted to go out at night when he didn't want his parents to know. So one day his dad sees the tree and he's like, we need to cut that tree down. But this teenager knew that was going to like cramp his style if he did that. So the dad's reasoning was the tree has no fruit on it anymore. It's just kind of dead. So that night, the boys and his friends purchased a bushel of apples, and they tied the apples to the tree because they just didn't want the dad to like cut the tree down. And the next morning, the dad gets up and he shouts to his wife and he's like, oh my gosh, it's a miracle. Look at this. This fruit tree has been barren for all of these years and it's covered with apples. He goes, the miracle of it all is that it's not an apple tree, it's a pear tree. So there you go. There was a miracle, but not really. So today I want to talk about miracles. And I want to share some stories of people who really, really needed one and how God came through for them. But when it's all said and done, what we need to see is that sometimes God does give miracles, sometimes he doesn't. But always there's a big picture in play that sometimes we actually don't see at the time. So let's start here. For you, you may need a specific miracle. Maybe it's a financial miracle. Maybe it's a relational miracle. Maybe a salvation miracle or a health miracle. And this health miracle is what we're seeing in Acts as we pick our story up in Acts 3, verse 1. One day, Peter and John were going up to the temple at the time of prayer at 3 in the afternoon. Now a man crippled from birth was being carried to the temple gate called Beautiful, where he was put every day to beg from those going into the temple courts. So he needs a miracle. He needs a healing miracle. So let's talk about a little girl who needed a healing miracle for her little brother. Tess was 8 years old. She could hear her mom and dad talking about her little brother, Andrew. Andrew was very, very sick. They were completely out of money. They were moving into an apartment complex because they really just didn't have any money to pay for their home anymore. There was too much doctor's bills. They just couldn't do it financially. So they knew that this surgery for their son was very costly, but they had nowhere to borrow money. They had nowhere to get it. They didn't know what to do. Tess heard her daddy say with tears in his eyes, only a miracle will save him now. So Tess went to her bedroom and she grabbed her piggy bank. She slipped out the back door and made her way 6 blocks to the Rexall's drugstore. She waited patiently for the pharmacist to give her some attention, but he was too busy talking to his brother, who apparently was in town. Finally, she took a quarter from her jar and banged it on the glass counter, and that did it. The pharmacist looked at her. He said, what do you want? And he said, I'm talking to my brother, he's down here from Chicago, and he said, I haven't seen him in ages, so what can I help you with? He was kind of annoyed. She said, well, I need to talk to you about my brother. She said, he's really, really sick, and I want to buy a miracle. His name is Andrew, and he has something bad growing inside of his head. And my daddy says that only a miracle can save him. So I came to you today, the pharmacist, to see how much a miracle would cost. The pharmacist started feeling sad for this little girl, and he said, I'm so sorry, but we don't sell miracles here. He said, I'm not going to be able to help you. She goes, but I have money in my piggy bank. If it's not enough, I'll figure out where to get some more. Just tell me how much it costs. The pharmacist's brother was a well-dressed man. He stooped down as he was listening to this little girl talk. And he said, what kind of a miracle do you need? Tess replied with tears in her eyes. She said, I don't know. I just know that he's very sick, and my mommy says he needs an operation. But my daddy can't pay for it, so I just want to use my money. The man from Chicago said, well, how much do you have? And she said, well, $1.11. Well, what a coincidence, the man said. He said $1.11, the exact price of a miracle for little brothers today. He took her money in one hand. With the other hand, he grasped her little mitten and said, take me where your parents live. I want to see your brother and meet your parents. Let's see if I have the kind of miracle you need. What she didn't know was that well-dressed man was Dr. Carlton Armstrong, a surgeon specializing in neurosurgery. The operation was completed without charge. Andrew came back home and he was doing well. And the mom and dad were so incredibly happy. They talked about the chain of events that led them to this place where their son got this operation. That surgery, her mom whispered, was a real miracle. She said, I wonder how much it would have cost. Tess smiled. She knew exactly how much a miracle cost. $1.11, plus the faith of a child. And if we're being honest, for a lot of you today, you need a $1.11 miracle. And you've been praying, just like Tess. But God is not cooperating. And I want you to know I do totally understand how that feels. I've told you before about this business deal that Rob was putting together, and we needed a miracle. We'd come to the end of the rope. We didn't have the money to continue on in this business, and our boys worked for us, so we had payroll to meet. There was just so much. We needed a financial miracle. I would wake up in the morning and I would pray. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I would pray. And whatever I would pray for when we were talking to the people who were buying our business, God would do the exact opposite. The exact opposite. Finally, I told Rob one day, I said, you know what, Rob, if I'm being honest, I'm really tired of praying. I don't even feel like I can even do it anymore. I pray, but I feel like God isn't listening. My prayers feel like a waste of time. My prayers feel completely futile. As you can see, I was in a really, really bad place. So as weird as this sounds for someone who teaches Bible, I always believed that God would, change the situation or change me. But I was frustrated that God wasn't changing the situation. So I did something really, really spiritual. I Googled, are there people who just are tired of praying? And I was shocked at the stories that I read of people that were just like me, like, I'm just tired of praying, it does no good. So I came across a girl named Lisa Cotter. She shared her story in a blog, and what she said snapped me back into the truth of prayer and miracles. She says this, the time I almost stopped praying and then God showed off. This is by Lisa Cotter. She said, I don't even know why I'm praying for this anymore. I told a friend between sobs on a cold winter morning. It seems like every time I pray for something really big, God says, thank you for your prayers, but that's not my will. Please accept this. I sat there perplexed, not angry or hurt, just perplexed, wanting to understand what was so difficult to grasp. Shortly after I married my husband, Kevin, we easily conceived our daughter and then a few years later, a son. When a few more years passed without another addition to our family, we began numerous appointments, tests, and treatments that all ended in doctors scratching their heads and saying, I don't know what to tell you. It's all very weird. Here I was a young woman desiring to welcome more children into a world that aborts unplanned children by the minute, and for no apparent reason, I couldn't conceive anymore. That morning with my friend, I realized that my prayers for another child had become half-hearted and cold. I was ready to give up on what had gone from fervent discourses on my reasons for my request to mumbling a few words for the thing I wanted most, because I just didn't really believe that my fervor or mumbling even mattered. If God wanted to answer my prayer, he would. And if he didn't want to, he wouldn't. So why waste my time, energy, and emotion on something that I actually had no control over? I get that kind of thinking. I really actually do. I hated the place in which I'd found my apathetic heart. I didn't want to be there. I wanted to believe that my prayers were important to God, that he listened intently like a loving father and considered my desires carefully. I wanted to believe that he was working for my good and not just answering prayer requests arbitrarily like I pictured him doing while he sat on his throne, like one for to be answered and 3 for to be ignored and 2 for to be answered and 10 for to be ignored. She said I'd been there before as I waited and watched my dad slip away to cancer and die at age 45. I'd been there before as I tried to comprehend the news that my husband's best friend and dear friend of my own was in a coma from a car accident that resulted in his death at 23. I'd been there on several occasions. In that moment, I felt what I wanted was never what God had planned. My friend said with extra spunk in her voice, God does want you to ask. I ask for things all the time, and I'm bold and specific in my asking. I'll say I want this thing on this day in this way. Of course, we have to be asking for things that are good and not saying $1 million because we want to be spoiled and lazy. He wants us to tell him the littlest details of our hearts, and he's waiting. Okay, I said, nodding my head, but not quite convinced. Here's what she said. Always, always ask, but be ready for any answer. I took those thoughts home with me and spent the next several months grappling with them. I began to get specific and did my best to be bold in asking, I want another child, Lord. Bless us again. And the more I prayed, the more I began to have peace. But not peace that made me feel confident that my prayers would be answered, rather peace with any answer. My heart's desires began to change, and so did my request. I no longer just wanted another child. I wanted God's will for the growth of our family. My heart began to conform with the heart of my Father. I started to want only what he wanted, all because I started to really tell him deep down what I wanted. I had found the grace to be open to his grace and was ready to accept his plan for our family, whatever it might be. In February, my husband and I made an appointment with a specialist as a final attempt to see if we could uncover the underlying issue of our secondary infertility. It was to be the last confirmation of our mysterious inability to conceive. After the appointment, we were going to stop any current treatments we were pursuing and live life as we were not going to have any more biological children. So this was her last attempt. She said the night before our appointment, I took a pregnancy test because I wanted to be able to share with the doctor that I was 100% positive that I was not pregnant. I casually came back to confirm my negative results and gasped. The test was positive. 2 clear pink lines beamed back at me. Something I hadn't seen in almost 4.5 years. I was pregnant. In the absolute last moment, God lovingly smiled down on me and said, my child, thank you for only wanting what I want. Our wants are now the same. She said, can it be that this long-awaited miracle has come to me? Learning to conform my heart to the heart of my Father was a long and purifying experience. One I hope I will not forget too soon, as it's easy to forget the good things he has blessed us with. And I love what she said, always, always ask, but be ready for any answer. For us, as I read that, I realized that's my problem. I had a perfect plan for our business. I had a perfect plan for how the business should be sold and how much we should get. And I had all of this financial stuff planned out. And the problem is that the people Rob had been dealing with were not cooperating with how I wanted things to go. And me not wanting to pray about it, I realized that that was my problem because I wanted what I wanted, even though I assumed what I wanted was what God wanted. And it was a reminder to me that so many times God does things differently than what we expect. And I love what Lisa Cotter said when she says, prayer is about God changing my heart to align with his will. The problem was I wasn't willing to give up that control. But when I did, finally peace came back into my soul. God, this is what I would like, but I'm totally on board with whatever it is that you want. I was reading a book from a pastor one time, and he was talking about there was an illustration about a carpenter. He was a carpenter, and he was building some crates for clothes that his church was gathering to send to an orphanage in China. And so on his way home, he realized that his glasses were gone. And he kept saying, God, please remind me where my glasses are. Like, I need my glasses. But God would never reveal to him where his glasses were. And there was a really good reason for it. What he thought had happened was that his glasses had slipped out of his pocket, fallen into one of the crates, and then the crate was nailed shut. His new glasses were probably headed for China. And that was going to be a problem for this man. Because the Great Depression was at its height, and this man had 6 children. He spent $20 for those glasses that very morning. And as he drove away, realizing that his glasses were probably in a crate to China, he's praying and he's frustrated with God. He's like, God, it's not fair. It's not fair. I have been faithful. I've been giving my time, my money, and now look at this. Look what just happened. Several months later, the director of the orphanage was on furlough in the United States. He wanted to visit all the churches that supported him in China, so he came to speak to this particular church that this carpenter had gone to. The carpenter and his family sat in their normal seats. The missionary began thanking people for their faithfulness in supporting the orphanage. But most of all, the orphanage director said, he said, I must thank you for the glasses that you sent last year. He said, you see, the communists had just swept through the orphanage, destroying everything, including my glasses, and I was desperate. He said, even if I had money, there was simply no way of replacing my glasses. And not being able to see was a problem, but because I couldn't see, I experienced these horrible headaches, and my coworkers were all in prayer every day about my eyes and my head. And then he said, your crate arrived. When my staff removed the covers, they found a pair of glasses lying on top. The missionary paused long enough to let his words sink in. Folks, when I tried on those glasses, it was as though they had been custom made just for me. I want to thank you for being a part of that. The people listened, happy for these miraculous glasses. But the missionary, they thought, surely confused them with someone else's church because they never put any glasses in there. But sitting quietly in the back, with tears streaming down his face, this ordinary carpenter realized that the master carpenter had used his answer of no in finding his glasses in an extraordinary way to help someone else. God is a God of answering prayers. And sometimes he does things that we don't, sometimes he doesn't answer it. And we might not ever see what happens on the other end of that. But we have to trust that God knows exactly what he's doing. This made me laugh. Here's a prayer that should have been answered no. There was a 72-year-old woman. She went to bed one night and she prayed, God, could you give me the skin like a teenager? So the next morning she woke up covered in acne. Anyway, here's the deal. Sometimes if the timing is wrong, God's going to say slow. If it's something God doesn't want at all, like to give this man his glasses back, then God will say no. But sometimes God says, I'm just going to put you on hold for a minute because I want you to grow. It's either go or no or grow. Sometimes it's even slow because the timing's wrong. Now, in our next lesson, we're going to continue with this whole idea about this crippled man who needs a miracle because he's crippled. But today I just wanted to set this up with saying that when you need something, pray for it. Absolutely pray. But recognize that prayer means surrendering our will to God's will. And when we understand that and align it, we will be excited to pray. Because even if God says no, we know there's a reason for it. And then we're okay with it. So hopefully that somehow helped you today. Have a really good day.